everybody, and a very warm welcome to Monza for the 7th round of the 2013 European F3 Open. We're getting ready for the second race of the weekend, the 14th of the season, around the Cathedral of Speed. 16 laps await the capacity field on the penultimate stop of what's been a very busy 2013 season, because from Monza, all the drivers and the destiny of the championship will go to Barcelona, the Circuit Catalunya, on the 9th and 10th of November. Will you join us, myself, Ben Evans, at a damp, chilly and overcast Monza circuit, where we have had showers throughout the course of the morning. The rain stopped about 45 minutes ago, but the track is still very damp and tricky, and that means that the pit lane is open for a little bit longer than we normally would have ahead of the race, to give the drivers the opportunity, if they so desire, to do more than one sighting lap. So on the grid, though, is the pole position car of the Frenchman Alexandre Cougnaud, who has been in scintillating form this weekend. He was fastest of anybody in free practice on Friday, and started yesterday's race in the back of the grid, but raced his way all the way up through the order to very fine 7th place. Sharing the front row of the grid with him is his RP Motorsport teammate, the teenage Uruguayan driver Santiago Urrutia. And Urrutia looking really for a strong result in today's race. He's not been on the podium since the first of the Spa races. That feels quite a long time ago. Third on the grid, and it's unusual to say this, it's no longer the championship leader, Sandy Stuvik. He has been passed in the standings by Ed Jones as a result of yesterday's race. So Stuvik, with plenty to do to move ahead of the driver he shares the second row with, the new championship leader, the UAE driver Ed Jones, who has been in blistering form. He's won the last 2 races on the bounce. He's won 5 races in total this season. Will he make it a 6th? An excellent 5th on the grid for Mario Marasca in the BVM car. Both he and Vicky Piria look very good in qualifying this morning. The team very happy with the setup, and Mario Marasca superb 5th. 6th on the grid, a little bit frustratingly for yesterday's pole sitter Nelson Mason. The Canadian driver gives us the thumbs up. He's 3rd in the championship standings. Drove really well yesterday to recover from a slightly duff start to race himself up into 2nd position. Some really fine overtaking manoeuvres from the often breathtaking Canadian. 7th on the grid it is Vicky Piria, the former GP3 racer, and the Italian driver looking to do well in front of her home crowd, which have really turned out in force at Monza today. The paddock very, very busy this morning, and the grandstand beginning to fill nicely ahead of the race. 8th on the grid, driver who completed yesterday's podium, the Spaniard Alexander Toril, who has been very, very consistent this season, currently holds down a very solid 5th in the championship standings. 9th on the grid is the DAV Racing car of Nicholas Pola, who has stepped up to the F312 chassis this weekend. You may recall that Spa, last time out, it was Pola who had a terrifying barrel roll in his lower F308, which was completely destroyed in the accident, and the decision was taken to upgrade him to the F312. 10th on the grid then is the Copper Championship leader, Richard Gonda, the Drivex driver, the Slovakian, who has had the pace this season, but like some of his Copper class rivals, has also had 1 or 2 slightly wayward moments. Going quite a long way down the grid then to find the first of the Emilio de Vallotto entered cars. That is Andres Saravia, currently lying 14th in the championship. Another driver making his F312 chassis debut this weekend for the Corvette Competizione team is Damiano Favoranti, who we've seen thus far this season at the wheel of the F308, which is the car used in the Copper class. The F312 is the car used overall for the main championship runners. Next up, the Russian driver Alexei Chuklin, who has shown throughout the season some very fine moments of pace, but has also had more than his fair share of disappointments, often being involved in other people's mistakes. And so Alexei will be looking to race himself up into the championship points paying positions this afternoon. Same goes for Yarin Stern, who is just starting to slip down the championship standings a little bit. He's moved down to 8th position, but he has been on the rostrum this season and does like these damp and changeable conditions. 15th on the grid is the Italian driver, Tommaso Mencini, making the step up to Formula 3 after considerable success in Italy in Formula Renault. This is a track that he knows well, and again, he has got his fan club here today, looking to cheer him on. A debutant in the European F3 Open this weekend is the Norwegian driver Falco Bauer, who has most recently been racing in the BRDC Formula 4 Championship in the UK and has been enjoying the step up to the Formula 3 machinery. 17th on the grid, Nürburgring race winner Hector Hurst, and very, very frustrating for Hurst this weekend. Yesterday, he was beset by mechanical problems, and today has got a lot of work to do. So yesterday, we were treated to an electrifying race. Off the line, the WestTech cars of Mason and Jones bogged down, enabled them to be swamped by their rivals. They arrived in to the chicane for the first time. Ed Jones had the early advantage from Alexander Torrell, Santiago Urrutia, Santi Stuvik, and Nelson Mason is further behind, one or two of them. Damiano Favoranti took a little bit of a trip across the curbs. Cameron Twynham and Lexi Chucklin were two of the early spinners. Well, Richard Gonda removed Trino Rojas's rear wing, so they went through Ascari. Amazingly, both would continue through to the checkered flag. Dennis Nagulin for the Campos team, showing his strongest performance of the year, very much to be found in the thick of the action. Chucklin and Gonda also found themselves engaging in some super scraps. It was one of those races, it was a classic Monza slipstreamer. Wherever you looked, there was overtaking, excitement and action to be found. It was Igor Urian who scored Copper class victory as the battle for the other spots on the Copper rostrum became increasingly ferocious as the race wore on. Sean Walkinshaw and Juan Zhu came together, the two WestTech teammates. Trino Rojas, as we said, decided that no rear spoiler wasn't really a deterrent. He continued all the way through to the checkered flag, which was taken by Ed Jones. Jones, having taken the early advantage despite the best efforts of those behind, led to lights to flag. It was Nelson Mason who was runner-up, and Alexander Torrell took third after a dogged defence from teammates Santi Stuvik and Santiago Urrutia. And as a result of that finishing order, it gave Ed Jones the championship lead. Plenty of support on the grid then for Nicholas Pola, the German driver who has adapted very, very neatly to the Dallara F312 chassis. Of course, the Dallara chassis built not too far away from the Monza circuit, out in the town of Verano, which is just outside Parma, and actually has a race circuit all of its own. So Alexandra Cugno on pole position as the weather remains very changeable. You can see, though, that Cugno and the RP Motorsport team, for the time being, have elected to go with slick tyres on Cugno's car, but just as the rain is possibly thinking about making a reappearance, you can see over towards the Parabolica that we do have a little bit of a shower beginning to start. Santiago Urrutia, the very well supported, very rapid Uruguayan driver, who's already had 2 victories this year at Portimao and Silverstone, numerous other trips to the rostrum as well, and from second on the grid, a golden opportunity for Urrutia maybe to score his 3rd win of the year. So this is how they line up in total, with Alexandra Cugno in pole, alongside him Santiago Urrutia, row 2, Sandy Stuvik and Ed Jones, the 2 real championship rivals. Row 3, Mario Marasca and Nelson Mason. That is a hard-charging row. Row 4, Vicky Piria and Alexander Torrell. Nicholas Pola then in 9th, and Richard Gonda, foremost of the Copper class runners, in 10th, with Andres Saravia and Damiano Favoranti rounding out row 6. Row 7, the Russian driver Alexei Chucklin and his Israeli teammate of the Emilia Devolata squad, Yarin Stern. Then we move on to row 8 with Tommaso Mencini and Falco Bauer. Row 9, Hector Hurst and the Korean driver Chae-Won Lim, who we've seen on the Copper class roster a few times this year. Artur Janos will be disappointed with 19th because he looked very good yesterday, as did teammate Valerio Carballo. It's been one of those seasons for the Campos squad. One step forward seems to be followed by a step back. The 11th row, all Copper class, Cameron Twynham and Igor Urian. Saad Al-Fawza, one of his strongest qualifying performances of the year, gives him 23rd ahead of Juan Zhu. 25th, hopefully now, with a rear wing. Trino Rojas, Dennis Nagulin will be disappointed with 26th. Gerardo Nieto in 27th, and then a wretched qualifying session for Sean Walkinshaw and Liam Venter, the WestTech teammates who have been on the Copper class rostrum this year, just couldn't string together competitive laps, and as a result, they have been shuffled to the back of the grid. But this is a circuit where you can overtake, and that is the beauty of Monza. It's why the drivers love racing here. And we're getting word coming through that the start of the race is not going to be a standing start, but quite prudently, given that we've still got a very slippery and treacherous surface, the race is going to get underway behind the safety car. So the grid is just beginning to be cleared, and then the race countdown procedure will get underway. This is the time for the drivers. When the nerves really start to kick in, they just have that one mechanic with the battery standing by the car, and they're very much left alone with their thoughts. Well, Formula 3 racing continues to really be the University of Motorsport. This is a category which all drivers still feel they must have success in if they want to make the step on towards Formula 1, which is where all of these drivers have their sights very firmly set. And the reason for that is that Formula 3 teaches the drivers about how to get the optimal performance from the car through setting up the wing settings, suspension settings. But unlike other Formula 3 categories, the European F3 Open is also very much designed with an eye towards the budget constraints that many young drivers face. And that is why all the cars run on a control compound Dunlop tyre. It's why the engine is a control engine that's supplied with a gear by the GT Sport organisation, together with some other components, including the gearbox. What that means is that development costs for the teams are kept to a minimum, and the focus is very much on the driver's performance and their ability to really learn the car and extract the maximum performance from it in terms of setup. And that's why we've had every round this year the best part of a 30-car entry. The engines begin to be fired up on the grid. The last couple of mechanics are making their way clear. And when they have moved off from the grid, we will very shortly be having the race getting underway behind the safety car. It is a 16-lap race or a 35-minute timed race. And generally speaking, if we don't have a subsequent safety car interruption, it should go to laps. What is a little bit alarming, though, is that some of the spectators, parts of the circuit away from the start and finish line, have got the umbrellas back up once more, and looking from our commentary box window, which is directly overlooking the starting grid here at Monza, everybody, as far as we can tell, is on slick tyres. And the reason for that is that these Formula 3 cars, relatively speaking, have got an awful lot more grip than power. They really are mini Formula 1 cars. And because of that level of aerodynamic grip, it actually needs to be really quite wet on track before the teams would make the decision to put on wet tyres, particularly as the wet tyres, if the track does dry out, will have a propensity to overheat. The dilemma, though, for the teams here at Monza is that whilst the start and finish straight, which is relatively open within this former Royal Park and dries quite quickly, the section of the circuit that runs through the trees around the Lesmo Bends is really quite shielded, and therefore it does take some time, if you have some rain, for a true dry line to emerge. And that sure is the reason why we are getting this race underway behind the safety car, making sure that you don't get caught out with cold tyres into some of the heavy braking zones that you find early in the lap here at Monza for the drivers. It's an ample opportunity just to get a little bit of heat into that Dunlop rubber, and you can see through this close-up shot they are all running on slick tyres. Let's hope that the rain stays away, we don't have another interruption from the safety car and we get treated to a classic Monza Formula 3 race. So the race clock has started. The race essentially is underway. Hopefully the interruption or the safety car period at the start of this race won't be too lengthy. The driver, though, for whom this is very good news, is the pole sitter Alexandre Cougnaud. He's been on the podium once already this year. That was at Jerez, where he had really his strongest weekend of the year thus far, but he was flying in free practice on Friday and walking up and down the pit lane talking to the teams. We have a spin from Nicolas Pola, who just overcooks it coming out of the chicane. The rear of the car overtakes the front, should be able to rejoin. He's going to have lost a couple of places. Yeah, he files in behind Yarin Stern. It shows just how easy it is to be caught out. Going back to Alexandre Cougnaud, he really was the talk of the paddock on Friday afternoon. His pace was absolutely blinding. But the opportunity to see these cars running at slightly lower speed gives you the opportunity to see that the way the teams are going with the setup here at Monza. As we have another look at Pola's indiscretion, it was just a little bit of over enthusiasm with the throttle And the power band kicking in very quickly and pitching the car around. As you can see now, as they come towards Ascari, how flat the rear wing is on the tail of all the cars, also how flat the front wing is. Walking down the pits during qualifying this morning, all the teams running with the minimum level of wing they possibly can, and the reason for that is that the rear wings on the slower corners provide an excellent degree of aerodynamic grip, which maximises corner speed. But of course, if you have the ring elevated, it means that down the straights it's an additional drag, and that can reduce the maximum top speed, which is why all the teams run the wing as low as they dare, and then hope that the drivers are able to find the traction they need through the corners. Certainly with the damp track, again, it just opens up the dilemma for the teams as to whether or not they want to go with something slightly different, because if the conditions were to worsen over the course of this race, that's when maybe a setup that just gambles with a little bit more aerodynamic grip might be optimal. Well, safety car turns into the parabolica, the lights continue to flash, and that means that we're going to have at least one more lap behind the safety car. The RP squad just on the radio to one or more of their drivers, just keeping them up to date with exactly what is going on, what the message is that the teams can see and are receiving from race controller. Well, in the International GT Open race, which immediately preceded the European F3 Open race, as into the pit lane we have got, I suspect, Nelson Mason, who is heading into the pit. He's got one or two others, and I think it'd be reasonably safe to surmise that those are the drivers that have maybe gambled with wet tyres off the line. When we saw the close-up of Mason on the grid, he had wets on. Evidently one or two others do as well, so they all dive into the pit lane and are going to make the switch to slick tyres, I would presume, and they'll all rejoin at the rear of the field. So it's a slightly depleted field. In fact, it's not Mason who went into the pits, it's Ed Jones, the championship leader, who has gone into the pit lane to change tyres, and that suddenly swings the advantage back in favour of Sandy Stuvik, because Stuvik has, in fact, it's not slick tyres, they've gone for wet. So Ed Jones putting on wet tyres, so evidently there is a little bit of precipitation coming down on the far side of the circuit that we can't see particularly well from this commentary box, or indeed from the television picture, and therefore Jones taking the opportunity to gamble on wet tyres. Well, that is going to be interesting. Falco Bauer looking to do exactly the same as well. And this could be very, very dramatic then. Some divergent calls on tyre strategy, gambling on what the weather is going to do. And it's always the dynamic with these late season races that on one hand everybody's got their eye fixed on the championship, on the other hand they've also got often inclement weather or time weather to deal with. Frustration for Yarin Stern. That tyre change seems to be taking a very, very long time for him. He's still got one slick tyre on the car on the front left, the other three are wets. All the while the safety car continues on its way. I suspect, given the pace of that first lap behind the safety car, some 3 3/4 minutes, that we are going to be looking at a timed race rather than a race to laps. Well, the good news is that the safety car is coming in on this lap, and so we will get racing underway after 2 laps behind the safety car here at Monza, and we could be in for some real drama. There is Ed Jones now, right at the back of the queue. He's going to have an awful lot of cars that he needs to overtake to bring himself into anything like contention. And Jones coming to today's race with a very slender 5-point advantage over Sandy Stuvik. In reality, it's fractionally more than that over the Thai driver Stuvik, because in the European F3 Open regulations, it's the driver's 14 best results that count, and Stuvik has been metronomic with his consistency this season, so he is unique amongst all the championship contenders, that he is actually going to have to, if he doesn't retire from any races, drop a couple of points paying scores. At the same time, the opportunity for him to, well, from his perspective, ideally get a race victory today, and Ed Jones to potentially finish outside the points would be just what Stuvik needs to really give him a buffer, with then the 2 further races to come in Barcelona. So it's now Cugno weaving around, getting some heat into his Dunlop tyres. Santiago Urrutia and Sandy Stuvik, his 2 teammates from RP Motorsport, in behind. Then it's Mario Marasca in the white and orange car. That's the BVM car. The first of the blue cars is the Canadian Nelson Mason. As at what point will Alexandre Cugno pull the pin and get this race underway. They head around the Parabolica. The green flag comes out now on the start and finish straight, and away we go. And Cugno plants his right foot, sprints down the start and finish straight. Everybody is in pursuit behind in the slipstream. It's going to be very, very tight into the chicane because they were 3 wide coming past the commentary box here, with Nelson Mason and Mariam Raska desperate looking to try and gain ground. Sandy Stuvik doing that as well. They all hit the brakes, and it is Cugno just from Urrutia. Then it's Sandy Stuvik, then Mariam Raska, then Alexander Toril, who tries to edge out Nelson Mason as they pick their way through chicane. They're all cleanly through behind, which is good to report. And already Urrutia looking to try and find a way past Alexandra Cugno as they negotiate the Curva Grande. In the midfield, they're all cleanly through, and Urrutia to the inside line as they hit the brakes into the chicane, and he takes the lead. So Santiago Urrutia moves to the head of the field. Cugno demoted to second, and that could very rapidly become third because Sandy Stuvik desperately tries to change direction, dive to the inside of his RP Motorsport teammate, Alexandra Cugno. It's Mariam Raska in fourth, Alexander Toril in fifth. Sixth place is Nelson Mason. Seventh is Vicky Piria. Toril, very, very confident with the level of grip that he has got available to him. It's Richard Gondra, who's to the fore of the copper classes. Now Mariam Raska taking his turn to challenge Sandy Stuvik as they head out of Lesmo and on to, and a spin behind, and it is Valeria Carballo who clatters into the tyre barrier on the exit of Lesmos. Hopefully that car will be easily recoverable. I don't think it's likely to be drivable after that. And look at the advantage that Urrutia has immediately pulled out over Alexandra Cugno, as the rest of the field all bob and weave looking for the toe in the slipstream down towards the Parabolica, moving from one side of the road to the other. It's Alexandra Cugno. Mariam Raska, though, will fancy his chances looking to the outside into Parabolica. He does just that and moves through into second position. Sandy Stuvik is also going to try and challenge for third here and goes around the outside of his teammate Alexandra Cugno, who immediately is thrust into the clutches of Alexander Toril. Another look, Valeria Carballo, she was out on the AstroTurf on the edge of the track, and around she goes. Fortunately not too heavy an impact. Also dramas for Nicholas Pola into Ascari. Has to allow Richard Gonda through. So the fight for second arrives into the chicane. So it's Mariam Raska then in second position. Third place is Stuvik, fourth Cugno, fifth Alexander Toril. Pretty much the rest of the field all disputing sixth, and this is giving Santiago Urrutia at the moment the opportunity to disappear off into the distance, which is really exactly what the Uruguayan driver would want to do. You don't want to get too caught up in frenetic slipstreaming battle here. As now into second place goes Sandy Stuvik past Mariam Raska. Will he hold it there on the exit? No, he doesn't. He slithers out wide. So it's Raska to the inside line. Also in the background, Nelson Mason squeezed to the grass by Alexander Toril. Some robust driving going on throughout the field. Stuvik, now he's in second. He's moving clear of Raska immediately, who's got Cugno, Toril, Mason, then Vicky Piria in behind. They've got the wave yellow flag, of course, on the exit of the second Lesmo for the car of Valeria Carballo. Santiago Urrutia then on the brakes into Ascari. His advantage over Sandy Stuvik. Just opening out ever so slightly. There is the Canadian driver, Nelson Mason, the first of the Team Westtech runners. At the moment, Mason will want to maybe try and move up one or two places if he can, but if he can stay in this leading train, we've still got 24 minutes of racing to go, so he doesn't need to do anything too dramatic at this stage, as long as the field all remains together. And you can see it really is, because Sandy Stuvik, able to take advantage of the slipstream, is reeling in Santiago Urrutia. When you say that this leading group of 6 cars, all really one train at the moment, maybe splitting into two trains of 3. Let's see as they sprint through. That's exactly how it's looking. So Sandy Stuvik chasing Santiago Urrutia. He's got Mariam Raska with him for company. Then the fight for fourth, Alexandra Cugno, Alexander Toril, and then Nelson Mason again. Cugno driving a wide car as Urrutia has to defend from Sandy Stuvik. Chicane, and this for Mariam Raska. It's very good news still. Toril trying to find a way past Cugno, and Nelson Mason, I suspect, will just be seeing the way that Cugno's defending, how it's slowing himself and Toril down, and exactly at that point Mason moves around Alexander Toril up into 5th position. And what we've seen with Nelson Mason, both at Monza this weekend and Spa last match, is he can close down gaps when he's not in the slipstream. So Santiago Urrutia still busy defending from Sandy Stuvik, the pair of them flying in formation, the RP Motorsport cars moving through Mario Mraska as Stuvik looks the inside of Urrutia into the first Lesmo, and that was very tight. And Stuvik slithers out wide, not quite as wide as Alexandra Kugno, who goes across the grass, and that's fourth place Nelson Mason, fifth for Toriel. Also into second goes Mario Mraska as a result of that mistake from Sandy Stuvik. And this is exactly the race we were hoping for at Monza today, a true Formula 3 slipstreamer. So again, it's Santiago Urrutia whose advantage has gone from nothing to quite a lot, and I suspect we'll go back to nothing again fairly rapidly as Mario Mraska leads Sandy Stuvik in the fight second and third through Ascari. Then they've got Nelson Mason already beginning to home in on their tail. Let's have another look at this. Stuvik jumped to the inside of Santiago Urrutia. Urrutia said, "You're not coming through there." Chopped across his bows, and that just forced Stuvik to run out a little bit wide. Sandy Stuvik, though, immediately looking to try and find his way past Mario Mraska. Mraska, who had 4 podiums last year in the Italian Formula 3 Championship. Driver knows this machinery and the track pretty well. Back of the shot there is Alexandra Kugno through the gravel, and Nelson Mason dives through at the front of the shot. Mario Mraska made the pass on Sandy Stuvik. How long would he have held second position for? The answer is about half a lap, because Stuvik goes back ahead of Mraska. They're both onto terms with Santiago Urrutia, and they're being caught as well by Nelson Mason. 21 minutes to go, and I'd suggest this is the moment to probably take the phone off the hook and get a nice cold drink, because this is going to be an absolute thriller through Curva Grande. The leading quartet all bunching up on each other. They're using the slipstream, and Santiago Urrutia, for the time being, just having to keep his eyes firmly fixed ahead of himself and just drive his own race. Richard Gonda, by the way, leading the Copper class, busy defending at the moment from Artur Janos, the Polish racer, up into 9th position. So he is absolutely flying in these early stages. And we've got these trains of cars all the way around the circuit, so looking to gain ground there. Tommaso Mencini moving clear of Che Wan Lim. That is for second place in the Copper class. They've got Wan Zhu just in behind them, and that all looks very, very tight. Ed Jones trying to squeeze past Trino Rojas, and Sean Walkinshaw bumps across the curbs. It's the leading quartet already into Ascari. And the RP Motorsport cars trying to break clear of Mario Mraska and Nelson Mason. Then we've got Alexander Toriel, who is looking to try and join in with that scrap. Here's the battle for second in the Copper class. It is actually trying to break clear of Che Wan Lim, and they have got vaguely himself into the mix. Wan Zhu, strongest performance of the season from the Chinese, as now Mraska uses the slipstream to challenge Sandy Stuvik into the Parabolica, and through he goes back into second place then for the BVM driver Mario Mraska. And immediately Mraska is in the wheel tracks of Santiago Urrutia as they accelerate out of the Parabolica down the start and finish straight. This is to complete the 6th lap of the race. We've got the race time showing, however, just to say it's an extended duration to 18 laps if they were able to get that in. So we've got the leading quarter out very, very shortly, because this is one of the best opportunities on the lap to use the toe of the car in front to get right onto terms with them. So it is Urrutia who leads, the yellow helmet, second place, the blue car, Nelson Mason, third place is Sandy Stuvik, who will move back into the championship lead if things stay as they are, due to the various dramas for Ed Jones. So Urrutia accelerates out of Parabolica, and I think it's fairly safe to say that the WestTech car of Nelson Mason is able to stay with the RP Motorsport car of Santiago Urrutia in the slipstream, but not necessarily gain too much ground. Certainly you can see he's not really in the Urrutia, but what he'll instead try and do is do exactly that, show himself in Urrutia's mirrors, try and force some sort of error from the Uruguayan driver. At the same time, Mason is being given the hurry up as well. He's got Sandy Stuvik just in behind him. Alexander Toriel also looking to join the fight. So through the Curva Grande come the leading trio. We are on lap 8 of 18, but we are almost certainly going to be going to a timed race. Well, there's only going to be a few seconds in it, so they all Constantine are up on the brakes through the second chicane. Mason just checks his mirror there, and then immediately gets his eyes fixed head on Urrutia. He makes a mistake and flies off at the Lesmos and clatters into the tyre barrier, and he just put a wheel on the grass, and Santiago Urrutia flies out of the lead of the race. He's okay, I'm pleased to report. He's detaching the wheel and clambers out. Oh, what a wretched error for Urrutia to make. It was a tiny, tiny mistake, and the punishment didn't fit the crime. Let's have another look at it. Just watch his front left wheel on the white line, on the grass. The car understeers off. Destination retirement for Urrutia. See it from another view. That's a big impact. Shows just how strong these Dallara chassis are. And this is turning into a little bit of a race of attrition, isn't it? Because we've already lost from the leading group, Mario Marasca. He spun the first chicane. And at the start of the lap, we were saying what Mason needs to do is pressurise Urrutia into the mistake. And that is exactly what happened. And it's now Nelson Mason who finds himself at the head of the field from 6th on the grid. And Mason has just driven maturely, but the job is far from done yet because he has got Sandy Stuvik. There he is, the tyre driver, sitting low in the cockpit of his RP Motorsport car, chasing Nelson Mason down the start-finish straight. They're about to encounter some traffic, and that is the Israeli driver Yarin Stern, who sees them both coming, goes through the escape road. That's very, very fair driving from Yarin Stern. He doesn't get himself involved in this squabble for the lead, which is currently 2 cars strong. But if Mason and Stuvik were to slow themselves down, then it could potentially come a 3-way tussle, because Alexander Toril it is who is now in 3rd position. But look at this, Sandy Stuvik right underneath the gearbox and Nelson Mason. And Mason has to cover the inside line. They get on the brakes into the chicane, and Mason has no option but to concede the lead of the race to Sandy Stuvik. And the RP Motorsport cars all seem to be very, very potent in a straight line, whereas the Westech car and Nelson Mason maybe a little bit more forgiving through the corners, and that is why Mason's able to make up the ground through the turns and under braking. Possibly just loses out ever so slightly in the slipstream, but of course, in a race like this where the slipstream is king, you don't necessarily want to be in the lead going on to the last lap of the race. We've seen that time and time again here in the World Superbike Championship at Monza. And the same goes for Formula 3. So Sandy Stuvik setting the fastest lap of the race last time around. You can see Nelson Mason harrying and chasing Stuvik as they go through Ascari. In the meantime, in the copper class, it's still Richard Gonda who leads the way and is remarkably in 6th place overall. So with 14.5 minutes to go, it is Sandy Stuvik who leads just from Nelson Mason. 3rd place Alexander Toril, 4th place Alexandra Cugno, up into 5th. A brilliant drive thus far from Artur Janos from 19th on the grid. And then we've got the recovering Mario Marasca, who moves around the outside of Richard Gonda into Parabolica. And Mario Marasca, as a result of that, is going to find himself into 6th position at the end of this lap, because he's also elevates himself past Andre Saravia. As do we have a change for lead? Nelson Mason takes advantage of the slipstream and moves clear of Sandy Stuvik. So they are swapping the lead left, right and centre here. And as they continue to battle, it's going to give the opportunity for those behind to maybe, just maybe, close in on them. So through Curva Grande, and it's the turn of Sandy Stuvik to attempt to reclaim the advantage from Nelson Mason. Mason doesn't defend. He is allowing Stuvik to the inside line, but Stuvik decides to follow in behind Mason into the chicane, and it's good reason for that, because both of them will be aware that they've got Alexandra Toril and Alexandra Cugno, who will be looking to try and close in on them. So Mason and Stuvik, obviously they are fierce rivals, but they want to dispute the victory between the pair of themselves. What they don't want to do is have others closing in. And Fred Jones, that gamble on wet tyres at the end of the formation lap proved not to be the right choice. He put slicks on, but it's going to be, unfortunately, a day of no points for Fred Jones, and a day potentially of 25 points for the race victory for Sandy Stuvik. So through Ascari, Nelson Mason, this time around, coming towards the end of lap 10, who leads the way. He's got Sandy Stuvik right in his wheel tracks, but you can see Toril and Cugno looming large, as is Artur Janos and Mario Marasca. That leading group, by the way, they're separated by 9 seconds, a little bit less than that. With 12 minutes to go, the way that we've seen these gaps ebbing and flowing, all is not decided just yet. Look at Nelson Mason, beautiful line through the Parabolica. Sandy Stuvik, though, follows almost identically his wheel tracks, and now they sprint down the start and finish straight, and Sandy Stuvik looking to close the gap down in the slipstream as they come past commentary box. It's just a car's length between the pair of them. It means that Nelson Mason moves to the inside line. Stuvik to the outside. Who's going to win the battle of the brakes this time around? It's Nelson Mason. No way through for Sandy Stuvik, but both of them were caught a little bit by Toril and Cugno. Indeed they were. The leading quartet now covered by just 2.8 seconds, but the fastest man on the track at the moment is Mario Marasca in 6th position, as Stuvik again through Curva Grande looks to challenge. There is Gavin Wills, the team principal at Team Westech. Very, very fine racing driver in his own right, Gavin Wills. Stuvik looks to challenge Mason into chicane. No way through. 11 minutes, 40 seconds remain. leading group closing up on each other, because on this lap thus far, the fourth place car, Alexandra Kugno, was almost a second quicker just through the first sector than the race leader Nelson Mason. It is a thrilling race, and they're about to catch up to Yaron Stern once more, who has, I would suggest, been into the pits once more, and this time to replace those wets with some slick tyres. Stern is going to have to have a consultation of his mirrors fairly rapidly here as Stuvik looks to challenge Nelson Mason into Ascari. No way through there for Sandy Stuvik. Nelson Mason swoops across, claims the racing line as they all sprint down the back straight, and they are being caught by Toril and Kugno here. So it is the Westec car, Nelson Mason, who borrows some slipstream from Yaron Stern, says thank you very much. That should be enough to stop Sandy Stuvik challenging me to Parabolica this time around. Alexandra Kugno shows himself to Alexander Toril as they sprint through the Parabolica, keep the right foot pretty much planted, and then down start and finish straight through the speed trap. They are doing the best part, if not a little bit over, 250 kilometres an hour. It's no wonder this place is known as the Cathedral of Speed. And now Sandy Stuvik bursts out of the slipstream bubble. Mason to the inside line, but this time Stuvik does go through and takes the lead of the race. So it's now the turn of Sandy Stuvik to see whether he can get to the head of the field, whether or not he can make good his escape. But the fastest car, not unsurprisingly because of the slipstream given off, is the car in fourth place, Alexandra Kugno, who has been immaculate in the dry weather this weekend, but already Nelson Mason looking to line up the move on Sandy Stuvik. Stuvik knows it. He covers the inside line. Nelson Mason looks to challenge the outside line. It may well go through here. Indeed he does. So Sandy Stuvik's lead lasts a matter of metres, no more than that, but Mason slithers a little bit wide on the exit of the chicane. He immediately covers the inside line into the first Lesmo. Avoid the grass, boys. You don't want to end up in the gravel trap like Urrutia. They do just that, but it's very tight. Out of the first Lesmo into the second. Around the very rapid right-hander they come for sprinting towards Ascari. So it's the blue Westec car, then the three black, orange and silver RP Motorsport machines. We are on lap 12 of the race. We have got fractionally over 9 minutes remaining. In reality, I think we could do with another 30 minutes added to this race time. Such has been the quality of the race thus far. They come out of Ascari and along towards the Parabolica. Which side will they go? Are they indeed close enough to Nelson Mason's challenge? In the background, you can see a change for fifth. Mario Marasca has worked his way past Artur Janos, and Marasca is only 4.5 seconds adrift of this group. They cannot afford to slow themselves down too much. Accelerating out the Parabolica, and Mason, definitely in comparison to the RP Motorsport cars, has got the corner speed, but the RP cars have just got the margin on the straight. So Sandy Stuvik is about to lose second position here because Toril dives to the inside line, and Stuvik looks to cover across, but he may lose out to Kugno as well as the teammates all go three wide, and it's Alexandra Kugno with the double toe who goes into second position. So the pole sitter Kugno goes second, Toril into third, and Sandy Stuvik, who only a lap ago was leading the race, now finds himself off the rostrum. And as a result of that interfamilial dust-up, it means that by the stands of this race, Nelson Mason's now got a large lead of 4 car lengths. Another look at it, and Alexandra Kugno jumping very late on the anchors, down through the gears, and moves into second position. And this is going to be nerve-wracking stuff for the teams on the pit wall, but really, RP Motorsport should be getting on the radio to their drivers saying, don't race amongst yourselves just yet, because look at Nelson Mason, he's romping clear. You want to run in formation, use the slipstream, work together, and worry about who's going to win this race on the last lap. Don't give Mason decisive advantage. Although, of course, we've seen already in this race, Santiago Urrutia opened up a little bit of a lead and then immediately was whittled away from him. So into Ascari. This is one of the corners where Mason is a little bit stronger in comparison to the RP Motorsport cars. For Kugno, the focus will be entirely on how much speed he can carry on the exit, and not as much as he would have liked is the answer, because Kugno was a little bit offline there. A couple of metres away from really the optimal apex. Nelson Mason just looking to try and break the toe. He knows he's got this queue of cars in behind him, but also, I'm sure, being told by his engineer on the radio that he's got 7 minutes remaining in the race. As Mason looks for his 4th victory of the season. It will also be his 3rd podium on the bounce, if indeed he remains within the top 3, as Alexander Toril looks to challenge Alexandra Kugno. And again, the teammates busy fighting amongst themselves. They don't want to slow themselves down too much into the chicane, and Toril breaks very, very deep, clatters across the curb, and almost delays teammate Alexandra Kugno. And, well, we saw yesterday that Alexander Toril was somewhat robust in his defence. He's doing the same again today. He almost interlocks wheels with Sandy Stuvik, as Stuvik now looks to move himself up into third position. He does just that. And Stuvik was looking to trying to drive a mature race here and let it sort itself out in the latter stages. Alexander Toril wants to pretty much lead every lap from the front of the field and is bouncing all over the curbs, and you can see immediately the gap that's opened up between Alexandra Kugno in second place and Sandy Stuvik in third. And I would imagine that there will be a slightly terse conversation within the RP Motorsport Garage at the end of this race, because we have still got enough time remaining that they could have given themselves the last couple of laps to really sort out the result here. They also, as they fight amongst themselves, are being reeled in very rapidly by Mario Marasca, who lap on lap is consistently the quickest car in the race. All of that, though, is very good news for Alexandra Kugno, because it means he has to rely a little bit more on what he can see through his visor and a little bit less on what he can see through his rear-view mirrors in terms of how he's going to plot his strategy for the next couple of laps, as he's right underneath the gearbox of Nelson Mason as they sprint towards the Parabolica again. Is Kugno going to challenge for the lead here into the Parabolica? Indeed he does, so it's Kugno who takes the advantage, and that's smart driving from Kugno, because he may well have observed just how good Nelson Mason is through the Parabolica. So if Kugno can dive in front, just interrupt Mason's progress a little bit, and that could help him out. But Nelson Mason still very smooth on the exit, will use the slipstream to come back. Kugno. It's now Mason, of course, who's got the luxury of no traffic in behind him. He draws alongside Alexandra Kugno as they hit the brakes for the chicane. And Kugno moves across, covers the line. Mason follows in behind him, and they have almost immediately been caught again by Sandy Stuvik. Such is the way these gaps are ebbing and flowing. The car they really need to watch for. So we have another look at the move for the lead. Kugno to the inside into the Parabolica, to the light of the RP Motorsport team. What they really need to watch for is Mario Marasca. He's still a few seconds back, but not running within a slipstream. Marasca is the second fastest car in the race at the moment. As now Kugno will look to try and find some of that pace that he showed in free practice, that he showed in qualifying this morning. Already he's opened up a slight advantage over Nelson Mason. Turning in to Lesmo in the copper class, by the way. It's Richard Gonda who is leading that from Tommaso Mencini and Shea-Wan Lim. A pair of them ahead of Sean Walkinshaw. They've got Gerardo Nieto ahead of them. Mexican driver, of course, had that altercation with Igor Urian. So essentially a lap down for Nieto. Mason having to fend from Sandy Stuvik into Ascari. And they're now getting to the stage of the race. We're going to have to start thinking about the last lap here, because we are coming to the end of lap 15. There's going to be 2 to come at the end of this lap. Such as the pace are running up. The lap times are about a 1 minute 50, and waving his fist is Alexandra Kugno, and he's caught Nieto into the Parabolica, and Alexandra Kugno is going to be hugely frustrated by that. Gerardo Nieto, though, doing exactly what they were told to do in the driver's briefing on Friday, which is if you're going to be lapped by another car, stick on the racing line, let the faster car find its way around you. Into the penultimate lap we go in the 14th race of the 2013 European F3 Open. Who is going to win? Alexandra Kugno, Nelson Mason, Sandy Stuvik, or indeed none of the above, such is the ferocity of this fight as Mason tries for second. Oh, that's a lovely move from Nelson Mason. He was so late on the brakes, and he's carried the momentum through, and he's immediately setting about bullying Alexandra Kugno, who has got blinding straight line speed, the Frenchman, but his car is dancing on the limit of adhesion through the corners. And all the while, they've also got Alexander Toril, who is trying to close in as well. They fan out on the brakes into the second chicane. And Mason just seems to be able to brake a little bit deeper, maybe, than the RP Motorsport cars. And it means he's forcing Kugno defensively into the first Lesmo. They're all jinking for position, and Sandy Stuvik pounces and takes second place. Lovely move there from Sandy Stuvik. Really just saw a gap and decided to go for it. But what it means now is that Nelson Mason will have the double slipstream effect towards the Ascari, towards the Parabolica, and then on towards the opening chicane. Alexander Toril in fourth has said, well, that looks like fun, I'm coming to join in. So we've now got, once more, a quartet doing battle for the lead of the race. We have got 1¼ laps remaining here at Monza, and Nelson Mason a little bit wide into Ascari. He clatters across the grass. Mason rejoins in fourth, and you just saw at the back of the shot he went a little bit sideways. And so Mason, unfortunately, drops out of the battle for the lead, which is now between Alexandra Kugno and Sandy Stuvik. And Stuvik looks to challenge Kugno into the parabolica, and he goes for it, and he takes the lead of the race. Will he hold it onto the start and finish straight? He does just that as he accelerates for the penultimate time of asking over the start and finish line. We go into the final lap here at Monza in what has been an absolutely blinding race from the European F3 Open. Comfortably their best race of the season, but who is going to win it? Because Kugno retakes the advantage and covers the inside line on the brakes into the chicane. Kugno in the middle of the road has outbraked himself. He runs across the curb, and that gives the advantage back to Sandy Stuvik, who in turn runs wide on the exit. So it's now Stuvik who leads. It's Kugno in second. It's Alexander Toril in third. As they head through Curva Grande, and it's Kugno who's got the pace over Sandy Stuvik, who moves alongside the Thai driver as they head out of Curva Grande into the braking zone for the second chicane. Kugno tries to squeeze Stuvik. Stuvik having none of it. They go side by side into the chicane. Stuvik keeps his nose in front, but then runs a little bit wide. They've got the two Lesmos to come next. And all the while they're being caught by Alexander Toril, with Mario Maraska and Nelson Mason not too far back either. Out of the first Lesmo, it's Stuvik who leads the way. And he's got his teammates, Kugno and Toril, in pursuit. Out of the second Lesmo, and Stuvik is now just opening out a very slender advantage as Kugno maybe a little bit too ragged, as he has been all race. It means that he is going to have to rely on an absolutely blinding run through Ascari for the final time to get back into the tow behind Sandy Stuvik. And he's got teammate Toril as well, right in his wheel tracks. Through Ascari they head for the final time of asking. The clock has ticked to zero, and it's Sandy Stuvik who leads the way, and if it stays as it does now, he will take the lead of the championship once more with his third victory of the season, and I think he's going to do it because Kugno and Toril are going wheel to wheel into the parabolica for second position. So Sandy Stuvik works through the final turn for the last time here at Monza. It's been a brilliant race from the European F3 Open as Sandy Stuvik sprints to the line. The checker flag is ready and waiting, and he takes the win. A fantastic performance from Sandy Stuvik. Second place for Alexandra Kugno, third for Alexander Toril, fourth for Mario Maraska, fifth for Nelson Mason. Artur Janos is in sixth, and in seventh and winning the copper class, Richard Gonda from Tommaso Mencini and Chae-Won Lim. Delight for the RP Motorsport team. It's been a very, very difficult weekend for them with the circumstances surrounding the team coming into this weekend following the death of mechanic last weekend in a road accident, but the team have paid tribute to his memory rather, in the best possible way, with an absolutely thrilling race from the European F3 Open. RP Motorsport a clean sweep on the podium, but you would have got very long odds on that. Some wonderfully brave overtaking manoeuvres, and the ultimate tribute for Gianni Marchetti. Absolutely brilliant racing from the RP Motorsport squad, and indeed the whole of the field in the European F3 Open. Well, we thought the races at Silverstone were good, but my goodness, that has topped those. Classic Monza slipstreaming. And in terms of the championship, well, who would have thought that Ed Jones would have a non-point scoring finish today, his first non-point scoring finish of the races he's competed in this season. Prior to today, his worst result had been a 6th place, but he finishes down in 19th position. Sandy Stuvik nets the 25 points for the race victory. That will put him back in the lead of the championship with just 2 races to come at Barcelona on the 9th and 10th of November. You'll be able to watch them live in HD on www.gtopen.tv. And well, even if they are a fraction as exciting as today's races have been, then we are in for an absolute treat. In the copper class, the championship advantage swinging now in favour of Richard Gonda, because he has 10 points to add to his copper class tally, and that is going to see him further building his advantage over Cameron Twynham. Let's have a look at the final results then, with the victory for Sandy Stuvik. 1.2 seconds in the end, his advantage over Alexandra Kugno. Alexander Toril in third position. Mario Maraska, a super performance from him for fourth, and Nelson Mason in fifth after that error at the Ascari late in the race. Richard Gonda seventh, winning the copper class from Tommaso Mencini and Chae-Won limb. Well, despite the frantic racing, it was a race that was actually very low on casualties. Stuvik takes the win. Teammate pole sitter Kugno second and the fastest lap, and RP Motorsport completing the rostrum with Alexander Toril. And well, we were saying, as the cars on the grid, that Formula 3 is the University of Motorsport, and that race was the example as to why, because the drivers had to use their maturity, they had to use their racecraft, they had to keep an eye on what was going on with the race clock, where their rivals were, waiting for the right moments to make the moves, and Sandy Stuvik did just that. Handshakes all around for the RP Motorsport team. Well, they looked very, very strong in qualifying this morning, locking out the top three places on the grid, and they have done exactly the same in the finishing result, although disappointment for Santiago Urrutia, the early race leader, disappearing into retirement with a heavy incident at the first Lesmo corner. There is Jesus Pereira, the principal of GT Sport, waiting to shake hands with Sandy Stuvik, and with very good reason. That was absolutely brilliant performance from all involved. The drivers heading over to the legendary Monza rostrum as we take another look at the highlights of the race, and really the entire race with the highlights. It got underway after 2 laps behind the safety car due to a damp track, with a slightly jumbled order as some drivers made the gamble on wet tyres, which proved to be incorrect. They all immediately started concertinaing up on each other, and then the slipstreaming got well and truly underway. Unfortunately, without Valerio Carballo, that spin next to the second Lesmo put her out of the race. Nicholas Pola is also to be found in the thick of the drama with that sideways moment through Ascari. Ed Jones, having made the switch to wet tyres, was down in the lower reach of the field throughout. Igor Urian and Gerardo Nieto had that coming together that eliminated Urian, effectively put Nieto out of contention. This was the moment where the race leader, Santiago Urrutia, went off into the tyre barrier. His race was run. We then had a 4-way scrap between Nelson Mason, Sandy Stuvik, Sandra Kugno and Alexander Toril. Lap after lap, they changed places, as did plenty of the cars throughout the field. More dramas for Denis Nagulin, Tomoano Favoranti. The RP Motorsport squad constantly swapping places as they took their turn to challenge Nelson Mason. Eventually, it was Alexandre Kugno who found a way through into the Parabolica as the Frenchman moved to the front of the field and tried to make good his escape. He was rapidly caught, though, by Sandy Stuvik, who made the opportunistic move on Mason into Lesmo. Mason then made an error into Ascari before Stuvik pulled off this fantastic pass on Alexandre Kugno around the outside into the Parabola to give him a lead that he took to the checkered flag, his 3rd victory of the season, and once more into the lead of the championship. So with 2 races to come, this is how it looks, with Sandy Stuvik leading the way by 20 points from Ed Jones in 2nd. Nelson Mason is in 3rd position, with Urrutia in 4th. Mason and Urrutia now no longer can technically win the championship. It will come down to battle between Stuvik and Jones for championship honours. So onto the podium in 3rd position, Alexander Toril. Applause from the mechanics and well-wishers in the pit lane. Runner-up, Alexandre Kugno. 2nd trip to the podium for Kugno this season, and his best result in his career to date in the European F3 Open with 2nd place. And then the race winner, Sandy Stuvik, onto the top step of the podium. Delight for Stuvik after a superb performance, and RP Motorsport, the winning team and locking out the rostrum. National anthem in honour of Sandy Stuvik, and on to the presentation of the trophies, and the RP Motorsport trophy cabinet going to be very, very full at the end of today. And across this Monza weekend, the narrative of the season has continued. Westtech and RP sharing the victories. A win apiece for the two championship contenders, Ed Jones and Sandy Stuvik. And everything to race for in Barcelona on the 9th and 10th of November. So the drivers posing for the photos on the rostrum. Thumbs up for the cameras from Toril and Stuvik. Paying tribute as well to Gianni Marchetti, whose memory I'm sure has been fueling the RP team this week. And as a mark of respect, no champagne on the podium once more. So move then on to the rostrum for the Copper class, which had its own fantastic racing. Before we do that, an opportunity to see just how on the limit some of the drivers were throughout the course of the race. Sandro Cugno in particular, the last of the late breakers. He seemed to be able to find grip where really there was none at all, as he and Stuvik did battle for the victory. And that move from Stuvik ultimately proving to be decisive. Lots and lots of supporters in the RP garage this weekend, and I'm sure that their catering unit will be buzzing after this race, because their drivers have done the team very, very proud today. So on to the Copper class rostrum, and in third place, the Korean Chaewon Lim once more on to the podium, and a good result for the Emilio De Villotto team, who've had a solid weekend in the Copper class with victory yesterday for Igor Urian and a third today for Lim. Second in the Copper class for Tommaso Mencini. That will be, I'm sure, with a loud cheer from his fan club here today. And then the Copper class victor, the Slovakian driver Richard Gonda, extending his Copper class championship lead into the final rounds in Barcelona. Slovakian national anthem for Richard Gonda, and on with the presentations of the trophies. So third place for Lim, second place for Tommaso Mencini. He's had a very solid weekend, Mencini, and for Richard Gonda, another Copper class victory. And the DriveX team, something to celebrate for what has overall been a reasonably trying weekend for them across the European F3 Open and International GT Open. So handshakes all around on the podium, and then time to pose for the cameras. This gives us the opportunity to remind you the final rounds of the 2013 International GT Open and European F3 Open on the 9th and 10th of November at the Circuit Catalunya in Barcelona. www.gtopen.tv is where you'll be able to watch all the action. And this F3 Open season is going to go all the way to the wire. So as the drivers celebrate with the champagne on the podium in Monza, it's time from myself to say Ben Evans and see you in Barcelona.